The first time she saw him, he was standing in the rain outside the glass tower of her company, holding a small boy's hand and trying to fix a broken umbrella with one hand while balancing a grocery bag with the other. The wind kept pushing the umbrella inside out, the child's shoes were soaked, and yet the man didn't look angry or defeated. Instead, he knelt down, wiped the boy's wet face gently, and smiled at him with a kind of warmth that seemed strangely rare in a world built from steel, money, and ambition. From the top floor of the building, Billionaire CEO Isabella Hart watched the scene through her office window, and for reasons she could not explain, something about that moment refused to leave her mind. Before we continue, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and stories that remind us what truly matters in life, please take a moment to like this video, comment, share it with someone who might need a little hope today, and subscribe to the channel Kindness. Also tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Your support helps these stories reach more hearts around the world. Isabella Hart was known across the business world as the Ice Queen of Innovation. At just 34, she had built Hart Tech into a billion-dollar empire, transforming struggling startups into global successes with ruthless efficiency and brilliance. Investors admired her mind, competitors feared her strategies, and the media adored the mystery around her life. Yet behind the headlines and polished magazine covers was a woman who had quietly built walls around her heart after years of betrayal, loneliness, and a childhood that had taught her never to depend on anyone. The board of directors loved her success, but they hated one thing, her independence. For months, they had pressured her to improve the company's public image before an upcoming international merger. The investors believed a softer, more relatable version of Isabella would help secure the deal. And in their eyes, nothing softened a powerful woman's image like romance. That was how the absurd idea was born. They wanted her to appear engaged, not truly in love, just engaged, a carefully staged relationship to charm the press, reassure investors, and give the public a story they could believe in. At first, Isabella dismissed the suggestion with cold amusement. Love was a liability she had long ago decided she didn't need, but the merger was critical for the company's future, and the board made it clear that her cooperation would secure billions in new investments. So she agreed. But if she had to fake a fiancé, she wanted someone who wouldn't complicate her life, someone ordinary, someone who would follow the rules and disappear when the act was over. That was how she found Daniel Carter. Daniel wasn't a businessman, a celebrity, or even someone from her world. He was a quiet single father working 2 jobs just to keep a small apartment and provide for his 6-year-old son, Oliver. After his wife had passed away 3 years earlier, life had become a constant balancing act of exhaustion, responsibility, and quiet resilience. He worked mornings as a maintenance supervisor in a nearby building and nights delivering food across the city. The day Isabella met him face to face was the same rainy afternoon she had first seen him outside her office tower. Her assistant had discovered that Daniel occasionally did contract maintenance work for Hart Tech's building. When he was invited to the executive office for a temporary opportunity, he assumed it was related to repairs. Instead, he walked into a room overlooking the city skyline and found the most powerful woman he had ever seen sitting calmly behind a glass desk. She explained the arrangement with blunt honesty. She needed someone to pretend to be her fiancé for 6 months. In return, she would pay him enough money to secure his son's education, pay off his debts, and give them a fresh start. Daniel listened quietly, his hands resting on his knees, his expression thoughtful rather than impressed. Most people in that room would have been overwhelmed by the wealth, the view, the power surrounding Isabella Hart, but Daniel only seemed concerned about one thing, his son. He asked questions not about money, but about time. Would the arrangement affect Oliver? Would he still be able to pick him up from school? Would the publicity expose his child to unwanted attention? Isabella found herself strangely unsettled by his priorities. Most people who entered her world were dazzled by opportunity. Daniel was simply trying to protect a little boy. After a long pause, he agreed. The arrangement began with carefully planned public appearances. Charity galas, corporate events, magazine photo shoots. The world quickly fell in love with the unexpected couple, the brilliant billionaire CEO and the humble single father who seemed completely unfazed by her status. But what no one expected was how the arrangement began to change Isabella. Daniel never treated her like a celebrity. He never flattered her, never tried to impress her, and never asked for anything beyond the agreement. In meetings, he listened more than he spoke, At events, he watched people quietly, often noticing details Isabella herself overlooked. And then there was Oliver. Oliver had bright, curious eyes and a habit of asking questions that cut straight through adult complexity. The first time Isabella visited Daniel's small apartment for a staged photo opportunity, Oliver proudly showed her his drawings taped to the refrigerator and asked if she liked dinosaurs. She realized, with an uncomfortable awareness, that no child had ever spoken to her so openly before. Over time, the staged relationship began to blur into something real. Daniel would sometimes bring Oliver along when Isabella visited the park to avoid reporters. The little boy would run across the grass laughing while Daniel sat on a bench, watching him with quiet devotion. Isabella would sit beside him, unsure why those simple moments felt more peaceful than the most luxurious events she attended. For the first time in years, she began to experience something unfamiliar: warmth. Daniel never lectured her about life, but his actions quietly challenged everything she believed. He worked tirelessly but still found time to read bedtime stories to Oliver. He never complained about hardship, yet he celebrated small victories like they were miracles. One evening, after a long corporate meeting, Isabella arrived at Daniel's apartment unexpectedly. She found him cooking pasta while Oliver sat at the table coloring a picture. The apartment was small and modest, but it was filled with something she couldn't quite name: comfort. Daniel handed Oliver a plate and gently reminded him to wash his hands first. The boy obeyed with a grin, and Isabella watched the scene with a strange ache forming in her chest. No cameras, no contracts, just life. Weeks turned into months, and the press began calling their relationship surprisingly genuine. Investors were thrilled. The merger negotiations moved forward smoothly, but Isabella began to feel a quiet fear, because somewhere along the way, the fake engagement had stopped feeling fake to her. She found herself looking forward to Oliver's laughter, to Daniel's calm presence, to the way he spoke to her without judgment or expectation. For the first time since childhood, she felt something she had long buried. She felt safe. Yet Daniel never crossed the invisible line between them. He remained respectful, steady, and distant enough to remind her that their arrangement was temporary, and that distance hurt more than she expected. The truth came crashing down the night the merger was finalized. The board celebrated with a massive gala. Reporters crowded the ballroom. Cameras flashed as Isabella and Daniel stood together on stage, smiling for the world. But later that night, after the guests had gone and the music had faded, Daniel quietly returned the engagement ring. The agreement was over. He thanked her for the opportunity and told her the money would change Oliver's future forever. His voice was calm, grateful, and sincere. Isabella realized something devastating in that moment. Daniel had always understood the difference between the act and reality, but she no longer could. He was ready to walk away. She wasn't ready to lose him. Before we reach the end of the story, if this journey is touching your heart even a little, please like the video, share it with someone who believes love can change people, and subscribe to Kindness. Stories like this remind us that sometimes the smallest acts of care can transform even the strongest hearts. Daniel left the building that night with the same quiet dignity he had carried from the beginning, but Isabella stood alone in the empty ballroom, holding the ring he had returned, realizing that all the wealth in the world suddenly felt meaningless. The next morning, instead of attending another meeting, she drove across the city to Daniel's apartment. Oliver opened the door first. When the boy saw her, his face lit up like the sun. Daniel appeared behind him, surprised but calm. For the first time in her life, Isabella Hart had no business plan, no strategy, no carefully controlled words. She simply told the truth. She told him that somewhere between the cameras and the staged smiles, he had shown her something she had forgotten existed: patience, kindness, real love. She told him that money had built her empire, but his quiet strength had rebuilt her heart. And she asked, not as a CEO, but as a woman who finally understood what truly mattered, if he would stay. Not as her fake fiancé, but as something real. Daniel looked down at Oliver, who was watching them both with hopeful curiosity. Then he looked back at Isabella, and for the first time since the arrangement began, he smiled in a way that felt different. Not polite, not careful, real. Just before the story ends, I have a small request for you. Please comment the word kindness below if you believe that love, patience, and compassion can truly change someone's life. Because sometimes the greatest lessons don't come from power, success, or wealth. Sometimes they come from a single father standing in the rain, holding a child's hand, and reminding the world that the most valuable thing we can ever give someone is our heart.